Hello, Anthony. I just thought I would make a quick little video here to address some of the things going on with your pizza delivery program. It's probably a little bit quicker than trying to type it all up and then not knowing for sure if you caught all that stuff. One thing I want to mention with your programs that I'm noticing that you have changed the form name somewhere. Okay, but if I go over here to this Solution Explorer thing, notice how it still says Form 1. So I know you're doing it. Sometimes I gotta catch myself as far as when I'm grading, I'm taking people's points away for that. When I see Form 1 here. One thing to note is if you're changing the form name in that Properties window, it doesn't change it everywhere in the program like you would expect it should. It's just one of those little things that really doesn't work the way it probably should in here. Make sure you're renaming it from the Solution Explorer window. That way it'll be changed here in your code, it'll be changed in all the other project folders. So that's just kind of a side note as far as naming stuff, because I can tell that you're doing it, but you're probably doing it in that Properties window, and that can lead to confusion if it doesn't change anywhere. Another thing as far as naming goes, watch for this too. I noticed that you named some of your variables here rad something. That would be the name for a radio button. And you're using the radio button stuff later too. That could lead to some real confusion if you have objects and variables named the same thing. Really, a decimal variable should be named DEC small, and that way you would know if you saw it in your code somewhere that DEC small represented the variable that holds the value for small, and if you see rad small, that represents the radio button. Okay, so I'm not going to change all these things. It'd be the same thing with these CHKs. That's the name for a checkbox. If it's a decimal variable, it should be named DEC mushroom. So we're putting three-letter prefixes on the variable names to help us identify what variable type they are anywhere in the program. So naming it, I know what you're doing here, that it's maybe what happens is associated with the checkbox, but make sure you're using the variable type prefixes to name your variables, and then the three-letter prefixes for the objects to keep those things separate. I could just see some real issues down the road for confusion if you continued your naming conventions that way. Okay. Other than that, I like the fact that you were trying to get into some if-thens and select case types of things to vary your pizza delivery deal. Okay, we're actually going to be getting into these topics next week, so a week down the road you probably would be able to identify what was going on here yourself. I can see here you've got a variable called number of toppings. That's basically an accumulator that's keeping track of how many toppings they checked on the form, right? The thing to note about that is, so all of these toppings are just worth 50 cents a piece, right? So let's say I check all 4 of them. So then num toppings is going to be 4, right? Because that's what it adds up to by the time it checks all these, and I checked all 4 toppings. One issue then when it gets to the select cases, to understand how a select case works, is when num toppings is 4, the only thing it's ever going to do is just go in here to case 4. And so case 4 says that the topping price equals what the pepperoni is. Well, that's 50 cents. So and it doesn't look at, there's never an instance where num toppings equals 1, 2, or 3 in that, because I've checked them all. If I check 1, toppings price equals mushrooms, so they're all 50 cents. And in a select case, whenever it does any one of these, it doesn't do any of the other. It can only do each one of these 4 cases. It can't do multiples of them. So if 4 is true, it does 4, and that's it. If it comes down here and you've only checked 1 and 1 and true, it does 1 and that's it. And the problem here really is all of these are equal to 50 cents, so all it's ever going to be is 50 cents. My suggestion to you would be to maybe just change this, and since all there's various ways you could go about this, but since all the toppings are all 50 cents a piece, what I would probably just do is say that toppings price is equal to 0.5 if it's 1, that it's worth $1. If it gets 2, that it's worth 150. if it's, you know, 3, and it'd be $2 if it ends up with 4 toppings. I think that's probably your easiest way to work with it right now. I know that kind of eliminates the purpose of having these constants, right? Which would actually be a good thing to have in this program, because what happens if the cost of mushrooms changes or something like that, then it would be good to have this system, because you could just change it right there, okay? So there's probably a better way to change this for a real world situation type of thing. But I would say for right now, with where we're at and this stuff being due by the end of the day, I'd be fine with you changing it to this structure, which would work for the toppings. Okay. Now, the other thing you had mentioned is you really didn't understand the equation I gave you for materials, right? Now, remember that one of the things in this program was, as far as the assignment, was that they were just supposed to be able to type in how big the pizza was, like in inches. So I think you'd have to change this interface a little bit, so there was maybe a text box where they could say, I want a 10-inch pizza, right? And then, when I like that you added toppings to this, okay? But what the problem was trying to get across, or the assignment was that, it didn't have you put in toppings, and I'm glad you did. But what it was just trying to get across was, if I order a 10-inch pizza, there's going to be so much cost for dough and cheese and pizza sauce or whatever, and that cost for materials is going to go up. Say they want a 25-inch pizza or whatever, that cost in materials is going to go up. So what you would maybe have here is another variable that was DEC materials as a decimal, because it's going to be a particular price as well. Now, you would need a variable that would hold, like the let's see, we'd need dim double diameter as a double, right? Because they might say, I want a 12.5-inch pizza. So we would have a double variable that would hold it. Now, I'm not going to go through all of this with you, but so what they would put in the text box, the text they would put in the text box would get put into this double, right? And then DEC materials would equal, and I think what it said was it was 5 cents times DBL diameter, can't type, I should use my IntelliSense, right? Squared, right? So that was the equation. So what that's saying is that, now the step I didn't have here, well, this would equal me dot some text box text, right? And you don't have a text box on your form, so this would lead to a error message right now. But so if I order a 10-inch pizza, it's going to be 5 cents times, that 10 inches squared to take into account the cost of like dough, sauce, cheese, that kind of thing, right? So that's the one aspect of this program you're still missing. Okay, I do like the additions that you made, just kind of some naming issues and maybe a misunderstanding of how the select case worked, I'm guessing. So hopefully those things will help you there. I've already kind of talked long enough. I think the rest of this stuff looks pretty good as far as you're getting the price, you're displaying the answer, you're doing all those kind of things. There were just some minor issues in there with that. I hope that helps. If you got further questions, let me know.